Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. We're honored to have with us Frank Breeden. Frank is on the air with us for 25 years, has been involved in sectors of creative content, communications, and business development. He has worked in the music industry, nonprofit management consulting, worked with 2 presidential re-election campaigns, that's the Bush and Romney campaigns, television production, live event production, in the literary field. And in 97, his music industry background merged with the nonprofit management sector. He was elected president of the Gospel Music Association. Under his leadership, the Christian music industry experienced its greatest growth period since sales have been recorded. He was the executive producer of the Dove Awards, from 98 to 2002, and numerous other television and radio specials. In 2003, he left GMA and formed his consulting group, a firm specializing in entertainment and business consulting. His first client was the 2004 Republican National Convention, and he directed all the entertainment there for the Madison Square Garden-based event. During the Bush-Cheney 2004 campaign, he served as the lead celebrity coordinator for the president's re-election effort, a role that he did again for the Mitt Romney presidential campaign in 2012. In 2005, he formed a partnership with Premier Speakers Bureau in Nashville, Tennessee, and founded Premier Authors, a full-service literary agency. He's the managing partner and personally represents authors including Governor Mike Huckabee, Jack Hanna, Kim Alexis, Judicial Watch, Scott Rasmussen, Ben Shapiro, my friend Steve Deace. His agency has enjoyed numerous New York Times best-selling titles. Welcome, Frank, to the show.
Thank you, Joe. It's good to be with you. And I forgot to mention in my bio that as a child I lived in Fort Richardson outside of Anchorage for 3 years.
Wow. So I assume you're an Army brat then. Is that correct?
I am. My dad left the Army, but I kept the brat just to be safe.
It's great to have you on this program. One of the things that the experiences that I've had in politics is an understanding, and I guess I shouldn't call it an understanding, but a suspicion that the nexus between entertainment and campaigns has not been fully exploited by candidates. And I don't mean that in a negative way. What I mean by that is that there's a tremendous amount of leverage that can be gained by connecting people and political movements to music and other aspects of entertainment, that it just seems like the United States might be even behind some other countries that have more developed that approach. Apparently, that's your area of expertise. I'd like you to tell our audience a little bit about what you see coming in the future with respect to entertainment and what you're doing to help affect that.
Well, entertainment and politics have merged in the U.S. for quite some time, but most of the time it's been on the Democratic side of the aisle. And in full disclosure mode, I'm a conservative Republican, and so that has been my opposing team against which I've played whenever I've been hired to engage in the political process. So I'm pretty well aware of my opposition. FDR, under the New Deal, when the Depression hit America really hard, one of the sectors that he sought funding for and gained was for the entertainment community. I think there was something like almost $50 million that was appropriated under the New Deal to hire scriptwriters, producers, directors, actors, and that effort is where we got folks like Orson Welles, who got their first experience on the other end of a government contract because the Democratic administration thought that entertainment was important. Republicans know that it's important, but unfortunately, I think up until about 10 years ago, the entertainment industry was looked at as more of an enemy than as an ally. And I think that was to our deficit that we took that view. And I saw it firsthand in the Bush-Cheney re-elect in 2004. There was a mind shift that I think was very important, and they started reaching out positively towards Hollywood. And when I say Hollywood, I mean the entertainment sector at large, which includes actors in both film and television, the stage, literary folks who are writing books, the folks who are stars in athletics, stars in NASCAR, major World Federation of Wrestling, very important and impressive figures when it comes to public perception and persuasion, and, of course, musical artists. So it's a pretty broad sector.
So I'm reflecting, of course, my conservative bent as well and saying that I really haven't seen that intersect because I don't generally go to a Democratic National Convention or follow necessarily closely a number of those candidates on the left side of the aisle. But there has been, it seems to be, over the last several years, maybe a couple of decades, an emergence of a very vocal conservative class in Hollywood. Ronald Reagan, of course, was vocal, but it seems that now there's even a broader class. I mean, is that a misperception on my part? Have there always been conservatives in Hollywood?
There have, but there was a major shift, and a great example of that is Frank Sinatra. I'll never forget when I was working on the convention in 2004, because we were in New York City, I wanted the program directors and I wanted to use the song New York, New York. It just made a lot of sense to open the show with that iconic theme. So I called Capitol Music in Hollywood, which is where their copyright permission office is based, and within a minute, I was told by some administrator in that office, oh, no, there's no way that Frank Sinatra would want that song being sung by Republicans. And she was probably in her 30s or 40s, and my perception was that she was imposing her personal preference and ideology versus doing her job, because I was trying to make that copyright some money for the company. And so I went around her and called Frank Sinatra's estate attorney, and found out that, in fact, Frank would have loved for the Republicans to sing New York, New York, because Ronald Reagan changed him from a Democrat to a Republican. And I think that is a metaphor and very symbolic of what happened with Ronald Reagan, that a lot of people who knew him as the president of the Screen Actors Guild, who had stood up to the union and who had taken a very pro-American stance, and in fact was one of the testifiers in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee in 1948. He took a very strong pro-American stand along with folks like Walt Disney and made sure that everyone knew that under his watch, communism was not going to infiltrate any further into Hollywood or into America. And I think I know a lot of people respected Reagan for that, and that legacy continues today.
So is there a similar catalyst at work right now that's causing people to be more outspoken on the conservative side in Hollywood?
It's more grassroots. Probably the last 8 years, and I have to give a big hat tip here to folks like Gary Sinise and John Voight, and a few others and Patty Heaton, Patricia Heaton, who are very conservative and well-known and successful actors who have made their stance known, and that has emboldened a lot of folks like them to come out of their conservative closet, if you will, and assert their right to think the way they want to think and still work the way they want to work. But it's still largely a Democratic town. And it's very organized, and the culture is such that you're going to be the outlier, I think, for some years to come, rather than the norm if you're conservative. But it's changing. But there are groups that are meeting. My firm actually keeps a database of folks that we keep on our radar as possibly or likely to be conservative. Of course, they can change their mind and they can change their affinity with candidates from election to election. But the folks that have not told us that they are absolutely liberal or Democrat or do not want anything to do with Republicans, we kind of keep an eye on and watch what they say and how they act and who they support and what rallies they show up to. And what I've seen in the past 8 years is a definite shift towards more Republicans, more conservatives, who are coming out to support conservative causes, and a lot of that has to do with Israel, in all honesty. A lot of folks who are Jewish or friendly to Israel do not like the way that they see liberals acting towards Israel, and it can be a singular issue for a lot of those folks who will come over to our side of the aisle and help.
There are significant costs associated, I would assume, with those that are particularly outspoken on conservative issues. We probably don't have time in this segment to get into this, so we'll hold on that topic until after the bottom of the hour. But I would assume that you see from time to time people that make statements that no longer get perhaps acting slots or pictures that they otherwise might have had. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I can share a story after the break. There definitely are those.
Well, Frank Breeden, he's a consultant. He's involved in tying in the connect between entertainment and politics, engaged in the Romney and Bush campaigns. We'll talk more with him about what's going on in Hollywood after these messages. If you have any questions for Frank, you can call 569-1080 if you're live streaming nationally. Area code 907-569-1080. Stay with us, The Joe Miller Show. Welcome back to KON Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM, The Joe Miller Show. We're honored to have with us Frank Breeden. He is involved in the sectors of creative content, communications, and business development, involved in the Bush-Cheney campaign, the Romney campaign. He's with a firm that specializes in entertainment and business consulting. He has his finger on the pulse of Hollywood and what's going on there as far as who's conservative and who's not. At the end of the last segment, we were talking about the retaliation that occurs when some conservatives in entertainment take a stand. Frank, thank you for staying with us, and appreciate you being able to give us some insight as to what's going on in the entertainment industry today. So tell us a little bit about this retaliation. What happened? It's my understanding you can't give us the identity of the actor or the entertainment individual, but tell us what happened.
Well, I had a very dear friend who was a major actor who was involved in a development of a new television series for one of the major networks. And so he had been going out to Hollywood to film the episodes and to do some of the test episodes for the producers to look at, the network executives. And he told me a story about how on one Friday afternoon, after they had finished a whole week of work, that the director wrapped up the work session and turned to him just in a personal aside and invited him to go out for drinks or dinner and said, as he was rubbing his hands together, so what are we going to do about this next election? And this was coming up on a presidential election. The director just assumed that this actor was a Democrat and was liberal. And he came back and said, well, actually, in this election, I'm going to be supporting the conservative side. And it actually had to do with a single issue that was so important to him that it made a difference in who he was going to support, and he jumped away from his home party and was going to vote Republican. And so the other guy just responded in a way of, kind of surprised. Oh, okay. And they just went on through their social engagement, and then he flew back to his home. And the following week, the entire series was canceled. And it's just an example of how sometimes bad business decisions will be made when personal agendas override good business sense, and it was the last thing that actor ever did.
Wow. Well, one of the areas that it seems to me there's lots of bad business decisions being made in is this whole issue of homosexual marriage. Hollywood has been pushing that to no end, and in many areas that don't make financial sense. I mean, like, for example, Alabama, 80% or so voted for traditional marriage the last time it came on the ballot, of course, now reversed by a federal court. I mean, still, most of the polling suggests, and I don't trust it all, but most of the polling suggests that the majority of Americans support traditional marriage, are not supporters of homosexual marriage, and yet this is something that continues to get rammed down our throats. I mean, even there are a number of popular segments on that tend to have conservative themes, and they managed to slip in a homosexual actor. It was just a gratuitous, hit on the traditional viewers. What's going on with that? And what do you see in the entertainment industry? Is this going to just continue full force as it's been in the past?
Yeah, it's actually a great case study of how entertainment industry matters. And then the larger question, should we even care about Hollywood? Yes, we should, because Hollywood does influence the culture. And the argument over same-sex marriage is a wonderful illustration, a contemporary one of how it matters. And I'll give you the rundown quickly. All of the states that did like Alabama did, that voted to codify that marriage would be between a man and a woman, what we know as traditional marriage. After that happened, that was a major blow to the same-sex marriage lobby. Well, they went to work, and they went to work in several different sectors, not the least of which was Washington, D.C., the news media, the education sector, and they really pointed their guns at the entertainment sector, and specifically at producers and directors and scriptwriters. And so when you mentioned a few moments ago about them slipping in a homosexual character or a plot line, that wasn't slipped in. That was deliberately plugged in, because if you look on the website for the Gay Lesbian Alliance it's the GLAAD website, Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. Their mission is to bring LGBT characters and plot lines, and I'm quoting here, to movie theaters, television sets, and even comic books, working with writers, producers, and studios to ensure accurate and diverse representation of LGBT people on the big and small screens. And a few years ago, they began this annual award called the NRI, which is the Network Responsibility Index, which they call the NRI, wherein they rate the broadcast and the cable networks on their LGBT characters and themes. So they count the total hours of original network programming, and then they score the network based on the number of hours of LGBT inclusive programming. And last year, NBC was the winner with 37% of their programming themed towards LGBT. CBS was in last place with 28%. Last year, when they published their NRI report, GLAAD said, and again I'm quoting, moving forward, networks must feature significant transgender content in their original programming in order to receive a grade of excellent in the NRI, end quote. A couple of weeks ago, CBS, which was in last place on their list last year, announced that The Bold and the Beautiful has introduced a new transgender storyline. And it's sort of comical. I'm not a fan of soap operas, but I've been reading some comments online, and what the readers are saying is, wait a minute, that character won't work to be a transgender because of the past storyline. She had a baby or something, and it just goes to show.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is, Frank, the whole thing is so crazy. I mean, we've talked about on this program a number of times about just the illogic of the approach, especially in the schools. And I think the average American person sees that. And when they see this stuff shoved down their throats, hopefully it's going to create an opposite reaction. It's not going to normalize the behavior, which, of course, is the objective. This is not to show an accurate representation. It's to normalize things that society has for millennia considered to be outside the norm. Walking Dead, I guess I probably shouldn't say this. Some people are going to be upset with me, but it's a pretty entertaining story. And, we've watched, I've seen the program. I try to watch it every Sunday. Well, what was it, 2 or 3 weeks ago, they inserted just gratuitously this little mini plot involving homosexual characters. And when we watch entertainment and it becomes basically a methodology by which somebody tries to change my thinking on an issue, which, there is consistency across the nation as far as, and of course that's changing. I'll grant you that. The media has had a major impact on the way of thinking toward gay marriage, for example. There's been a major shift. There's no question about it, despite the fact that I think still more people support traditional marriage. But I think people like me react in a way when they see this stuff getting shoved down their throats. And I don't know, I think it creates an opening, shall we say. We were talking during the break. You said something like 1/3 now of folk in Hollywood have conservative leanings. And that's a major, at least from my perspective, growth. I looking back over the last 3 or 4 decades that I've been watching the media, it's hard to find a conservative, and that's encouraging. But I think people are really going to reach out for that. What's going on in the conservative production to try to, accommodate this yearning that a lot of Americans have to not have this kind of junk shoved down our throats?
Well, one of the most successful producers in television, bar none, is Mark Burnett. Mark Burnett is married to Roma Downey, whom we knew from Touched by an Angel. They're a dear Christian couple, very conservative, and their programming is very family-friendly. And so they are actively trying to provide entertainment that's engaging, competitive, that makes money, but also is wholesome for the entire family to watch. And so there's a great example on the traditional family side of things. Clint Eastwood and his American Sniper movie. Clint Eastwood is no slouch when it comes to his entertainment capital. He's a very well-recognized, he's a big star, he's a megastar. And when he gets involved in producing a movie like American Sniper, he was taking on a very hot topic in terms of, pro red, white, and blue, red meat American values and patriotism, and took a lot of heat for it. But there are some other folks who are in two different streams. There's the direct Christian stream where Christians are trying to produce Christian content for Christians, and then there are folks like Mark Burnett who are producing content for the general culture, and it's just wholesome. I think the track record has shown that that kind of content is popular with people. It makes money, and as long as it continues to make money, there will be an audience for it, and it will be produced. So I'm optimistic on that front.
Well, I appreciate you bringing us up to speed with what's going on there. Again, one of the areas that I don't think has been fully exploited, as you've said, on the conservative side, the use of entertainment in Republican circles. Tell us a little bit about how you see this presidential campaign season shaping up and whether or not the conservative candidates are going to capitalize on what's available to them through the entertainment industry, people that are like-minded there.
Well, we're in that phase where the political industry is really ablaze ever since CPAC happened, and now that Ted Cruz made his announcement a few days ago. We're in that phase where lots of different candidates are getting their campaign together and trying to figure out position and so forth. What I see in the entertainment industry is that folks who are willing to be political are going to be watching what happens, and then they're going to hitch their star to somebody that they feel is appropriate. So I think that's going to be on the radar in the next 3 to 6 months.
Frank Breeden, we have coming up next Raz Schaefer, who is, I guess he started the Draft Ted Cruz for President Super PAC, been involved directly with the Cruz Senate campaign before. Maybe he can tell us a little more about whether or not Senator Cruz is going to see the opportunity. But, Frank, I appreciate you bringing us up to speed on this. Would love to have you back at some time in the future to keep us abreast of what's going on in Hollywood. Keep up the good work.
All right, thanks. Nice to talk to you.
Stay with us. The Joe Miller Show. Be back with you in a few.